So our topic today is going to be diet and nutrition. And to start, I want to give you some statistics to highlight the gravity of the situation. So studies as of 2018 show that the prevalence of obesity was 42.4% in adults and 18.5% in children and adolescents. And obesity-related conditions can include heart disease, stroke, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, sleep deprivation, arthritis, and even certain cancers. Um, these chronic diseases together account for more than $1.5 trillion in healthcare costs and lost productivity. So it's definitely an issue that we need to figure out how to address and how to solve. Another issue I wanted to discuss briefly is that medical education in the United States. So currently, the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, which is the accrediting organization for all medical schools offering an MD degree, currently recommends no less than 25 hours of nutrition education across the 4-year school curriculum. Now, if you think that doesn't sound like a lot, you're correct, because 25 hours of education over 4 years, it doesn't really amount to much. So the problem is that 2014 study shows that most med schools, up to 71%, failed to provide the recommended minimum of 25 hours. 36 provided less than half of that. And another thing they found is that nutritional instruction is still largely confined to the first 2 years of medical school, which are preclinical courses where you're sitting in the lecture hall. The average that they found is about 14.3 hours of nutritional instruction. And less than half of all schools report teaching any kind of nutritional education in the clinical setting, which is the 3rd and 4th year of medical school. In those years, you're in the hospital, you're seeing patients, so they're really crucial formative years. With that being said, medical professionals are at a severe disadvantage. We're expected to provide all this guidance, all this education, but we're not being given that education during the medical curriculum. So what do we have to do? We have to self-teach ourselves. And when you look at the schedule and demands of residents and attending physicians, that's asking for more work for us to do because we're already pretty busy. And now we're gonna have to self-teach ourselves and keep up with all the latest research on nutrition and diet. So as you can see, it's a tall task for physicians nowadays. And I think that with the current trend, which I mentioned last week, now we're focusing more on a team-centered approach where we don't try to address all the needs of the patient by ourselves. We work as a team with like therapists, social workers, dietitians. I think that is definitely going to help with guiding the correct treatment for our patients. So without further ado, today we have our guest speaker, Tygue Clausen, here to talk more about what is good health when it comes to nutrition. Tygue is joining us all the way from Florida. So Tygue, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you currently do?
Oh, goodness. Would I love to tell you all about myself. So, hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a great pleasure of mine to, talk about the things that I obviously love since I went to school for it, and to, try to kind of clear up any type of misinformation or anything like that to kind of get us in the right state of mind. So, this is my presentation. I hope we are not motion sickness because it does spin us around just a little bit, but I promise we'll get through it as much as possible. So, fun fact before I get started, this is how nerdy I am. The circles that you see on the screen on the left is actually in the shape of the glucose molecule. That's a little hidden secret that I kept from our wonderful host. So, let's get started. So, who am I? The wonderful introduction. My name is Tygue Clausen. I am a graduate dietitian and I work for the VA. So my primary group of individuals that I serve are going to be the US military veterans, and I work in Bay Pines, Florida. Basically, I just work in St. Pete on that little peninsula all the way on the left-hand side. So I originally got my undergrad degree from the University of North Florida in Jacksonville. Currently in my last semester of grad school, working towards my master's in public health with a concentration in nutrition and dietetics. So my favorite food is all types. So there's absolutely no exclusion here. I love all sushi and pizza. And I might lose a few of you on this, but I love pineapple on pizza. So I'm so sorry. And fun fact, I'm a 2nd-degree black belt. So that's me. And let's kind of talk about what we are going to talk about overall. So this is just an overview of our topics. So basically, I'm going to kind of give you a rundown of what it's like to become an RD, so a registered dietitian, and what we do on a normal day-to-day basis. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my personal favorite area of nutrition. We'll talk about the diseases that I normally either treat or tend to mentor individuals to make more healthful decisions. We're going to talk about those fad diets and a few supplements. Common nutrition myths, which is probably going to be the meat of what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about the general healthful nutrition recommendations from a nutrition professional. And I'm going to give you a few resources for you to learn a little bit more about nutrition, and that is going to be deemed the most beneficial for you, which won't give you a lot of misinformation. And then I'll wrap it up for a little bit of more questions. So let's jump into it. So what is a registered dietitian? So I'm going to be saying RD, so which means registered dietitian. So it's going to be interchangeable, okay? So basically, we require a minimum of a 4-year college degree. So starting in 2024, all dietitians that are going to be entering into the workforce will require a master's degree. So ultimately, that will require 6 years of college education. And kind of like what Dr. Dang was saying, that there's not a lot of education in the medical school route, where my 4-year degree equated to 125 hours, and that's credit hours. So that equals anywhere from about 375 actual education hours in the field of nutrition. So I am a little biased when I do say I tend to know a little bit more about nutrition than most, but we all do work together, absolutely. So after you graduate from that 4-year or soon to be master's, you'll have to get accepted to a dietetic internship. And this is a scary statistic, but only 48% of people who apply actually get into it. So it's kind of like a less glorified med school type of, residency and stuff like that. It's our residency to what the doctors do. Some states are a little bit different on the amount of hours that you'll have to accrue for. So anywhere from 900 to 1,200 hours of like actual hands-on clinical experience. And at least 90 to 95% of those internships are unpaid, which is a very exciting and strenuous time in most dietitians' lives. And then you have to pass a national registration exam, so kind of like the boards for doctors or the bar exam for lawyers. And then every 5 years, you have to do about 75 hours of continuing education. And I always like to throw this in whenever we talk about what a dietitian is. I always like to talk about what we're not. So what we're not is the food police. I personally hate telling people what to eat or how to eat, because ultimately we'll get a little bit more into this in a little bit, but it's ultimately up to you for you to define what your own version of health is. Okay. So we have a bunch of different areas that a dietitian can work. So generally speaking, we can do inpatient, which is inside the hospital itself, outpatient, where I see patients and I have certain appointments that last X amount of time, and they're coming to work with me for a certain outcome. Community, so community, which we'll talk about in one of those slides, is kind of like the jack of all trades. And hopefully that didn't, there we go. Sorry, something's going crazy with my computer. And then we have food service, which is basically just our managers that are going to be running the menus at hospitals or long-term care facilities, or even Disney. Disney hires a lot of dietitians to make those healthful menus to be a little bit more acceptable for certain clientele, And then we have the miscellaneous that really didn't focus or fall into too much of a circle, but education, private practice, and then research. And if you want to know anything about where the money is, it's definitely going to be in research, because nutrition is one of the biggest ever evolving science fields besides medical. So absolutely. So jumping into the inpatient route. So the dietitian, kind of like Dr. Dang said, is we work alongside the doctors, we work alongside social workers, nurses, and just overall any other employee that is associated with the patient's care. So normally, we'll normally only see patients that have a nutrition-related admission. So unfortunately, eating your fruits and veggies is not going to solve that broken toe. So I wouldn't necessarily come to see you if you only had a broken toe and you didn't need to talk to me for any reason. However, if you got admitted for diabetes or anything associated with that, I would be coming and knocking on your door and sitting down and having a conversation with you. So we do a lot of meetings that really help try to get the patients discharged as quick as possible, which sounds really bad, but we try to get them as discharged as quick as possible because it's very expensive to be in the hospital. And I don't think anyone wants to be in the hospital. So we try to facilitate the best care possible in the shortest amount of time. And you can have anywhere from 6 to, I know some people do 18 patients a day, which is a lot to fit into a 6 to 10 hour shift. So more specifically, something a little bit more tangible. So COVID-19 and the dietitians. So what we're finding out is severe cases of COVID-19 will require a ventilator. Ventilators are a necessity for these patients because it helps keep the lungs moving and pumping oxygen throughout the body. You're normally sedated, so you're in a nice peaceful little sleep. You can't really eat or drink or anything like that. So basically, we are the ones that help calculate artificial nutrition through feeding tubes and even through your veins and stuff like that. So inpatients can also give patients, the inpatient RDs basically give patients the energy and nutrition to help them recover as quick as possible, because that's our number one goal in an actual hospital setting. Outpatient, this is where I work. So an outpatient RD has individual appointments with single clients or with groups. I do a lot of education-based teaching as well. So we basically help clients achieve the nutrition goals that they want, not necessarily what the doctor wants. There's a lot of, I would say, older school doctors that are a little, I wouldn't say stuck in their ways, but they tend to have the idea that is best for the patient that doesn't necessarily involve the patient's idea of what they think is healthy. So I always start the conversation with, oh, your doctor wanted me to talk to you about blank, blank, and blank. Anything else you wanted to add to the agenda? And 9 times out of 10, they're like, oh, I'd never wanted to talk about that. And I'm like, okay, then where are we going on this adventure you're going to take me on? So I always try to give them the opportunity to make their own healthcare decision, which is really important. So appointments can last 20 to 30 minutes. I've had appointments last 75 minutes. I've had it last 90 minutes. So it comes to time management in certain cases. So you can also include teaching nutrition education classes or involve training other medical staff. So I do a lot of in-services with medical professionals, and my personal hospital is a internship hospital. So we get a lot of interns coming through. So I'll do classes with them to kind of get them on the right track. Community, like I said, jack of all trades. So places like the YMCA, nonprofits, so like various food banks or Meals on Wheels, WIC, Women, Infant, and Children. Education, so kindergarten all the way through college. My personal college had 4 dietitians on staff at all times for counseling, menus, allergies, all sorts of things. Obviously research, private practice, and basically the community dietitians are essential to help create policies and advocate for our profession as a whole to try to get the best out of nutrition for everyone. So food service, which is not my idea of fun. So they are basically the managers and help run the huge departments in either companies, hospitals, restaurants, even amusement parks. And they play a large role in making menus, ordering food and equipment, and actually cooking the meals when people call out. Thankfully, I did not have to cook anything in my internship because I may or may not have burnt a few things. So that's a good thing. So what a normal day looks like to me, I work 7:30 to 4. I normally see 5 to 7 clients a day if they answer their phone, because now with COVID, everything is through phone and visual means. So I just pray that they all answer the phone because I just want to talk. I teach one a weight loss class a week. I play a role in the nutrition internship at the hospital, so I'll teach classes for the newer interns, and I'll help them with their special projects, so basically like their thesis of the internship, and a lot of medical charting and note writing. So if anyone is currently in middle school, high school, even college, I might write more than you in one singular day in the new semester. That's how much writing it is. It's crazy. So this is my specific area of expertise. Expertise is a little broad, but this is something that I really, really enjoy. So something called intuitive eating. So it's a lifestyle, not a diet, created by two dietitians in the 1990s. So Evelyn Tribole and Elise Reich. Shout out to them. So basically it helps relieve the damage between fad diets and the client's personal relationship with food, and it promotes body positivity. So a lot of times I'll have patients that said, oh, I've gone through Atkins, keto, Weight Watchers, South Beach, and the list goes on. And through that entire process over 5, 10, 15 years, they're like, I just don't know what to eat. All food is bad for me. And that hurts me a little bit, because food should not be bad. It should be given to you for energy. You should enjoy that really savory, even McDonald's hamburger. Like if that's something you enjoy, those should be the foods that should make you happy. And that's what I want to promote. So basically it helps create the stigma that all food is good food and there's no such thing as bad food. Because if there's anything you want to take away from this, food is an inanimate object that deserves no actual emotions tied to it. And a lot of times in this society with, the models on these papers and stuff like that, skinny is healthy, but that's not necessarily true. And it really helps create that better relationship with food.
So T, you mentioned that you're a dietitian, and I think one thing that would be interesting for our audience, could you explain the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian?
Oh, yes, I can. So I'm going to preface this answer a little bit with I mean absolutely no disrespect to any nutritionist or health coach that may be in the audience. So the difference between a nutritionist and a dietitian, to put it very bluntly, a nutritionist prints their degree off the internet after a 4-hour informational seminar, like over the weekend or something like that. They don't go through any type of, regulations or boards or anything like that. And they don't have the qualifications to practice medical nutrition therapy, which no matter what, only dietitians in the entire United States are allowed to practice. So I always heed a bunch of warnings for people who follow nutritionists. Just make sure that they're not taking away foods from you that you really enjoy, because that tends to hurt you later on down the road.
Thank you very much. I think that's really good for the audience to know.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'll be happy to elaborate if anyone has more questions later on. So the most common diseases that I see, and I don't really like using the word diseases. I tend to normally just say like states or questions or something like that, I try to release the stigma of disease as a negative thing. You just have something a little bit different with your body, and I'm here to kind of help you, coach you through it. So normally diabetes, congestive heart failure, or just heart failure overall, kidney disease, quote unquote obesity, we'll talk about it, and then underweight. And believe it or not, underweight is a huge issue, especially in the veteran population. So diabetes, 2 types of diabetes. So basically type 1 is more genetic. It's an autoimmune disease. And type 2 is mostly considered that lifestyle disease, so to speak. So type 1, so it's considered an autoimmune disease when the pancreas stops producing insulin. So insulin is basically the lock and key model. So insulin will help bring in those sugars, which are going to be a good thing for you and your energy, into the cell for your body to use. Otherwise, you get really run down, really tired, and 9 times out of 10, really grumpy. So you are born with it. Sometimes people don't show any type of symptoms until some people don't find it until they're 60, or some people find out right at age 1. So it's really all dependent on your life in general. So a few statistics: 1.6 million Americans are currently diagnosed with type 1, and about 200,000 are youth. So youth is defined as 20 years or younger. So the normal treatment that we tend to go by is insulin, which is basically artificial insulin inside the body, diet, and exercise, believe it or not. What one dietitian cannot do is we cannot prescribe medications or alter any type of dosage or anything like that. So this is where a lot of collaboration comes into play with pharmacists and doctors and stuff like that, to where we try to find that sweet spot where they're going to really react the most to the treatments that we're giving.
All about that teamwork.
It is about the teamwork, sometimes more than what's necessary. It tends to make it a little clouded at times, but it's 100% necessary for the patient's goals.
Yeah.
And then type 2, like I said, it's a little bit more lifestyle related. So basically what's causing type 2 diabetes is your body is just a little bit less sensitive to the insulin. So your body just doesn't react as well to that insulin as well as other people. Or your body just doesn't produce enough for your body's needs. So about 34 million Americans are currently diagnosed with type 2. And it's kind of close to that other statistics of type 1, but 193,000 are youth, which is 20 years or younger. So depending on the case, we can treat it with insulin. We can treat it with just oral medication once or twice a day. Nothing too crazy. It's like taking a multivitamin. And then, believe it or not, diet and exercise. So basically, diabetes is number one that I see in my clinic almost every day. At least out of the 5 appointments that I have, 9 times out of 10, at least 3 to 4 of them are diabetic. And it's not a scary thing. It's not the end of the world. We just have to be a little bit more conscious and a little bit more mindful of how we go about what foods and how often we eat certain foods. That's it. Nothing too different. Heart failure. So basically it's caused by the weakening of the heart, which may or may not be strong enough to pump all the blood throughout the body. So basically your heart is starting to get a little tired, and it makes it a little difficult to get all that blood throughout. So there's multiple different types. There's 4 different parts of the heart. So 4 different chambers, all of which can be affected differently. It's actually a very complex type of state. But about 6.1 million Americans are diagnosed with heart failure. It is pretty rare to see youth with any type of heart disease or heart failure unless there's a genetic portion and you're born with it. So basically, exercise, if it's cleared by your doctor, and diet and medication. So it's kind of getting a theme going through where it's a lot of diet, a lot of exercise, all the stuff we know, but sometimes we just don't know how to go about it. Kidney disease. So basically the kidneys are the pasta strainer of the body. So kidneys just can't filter out everything that you eat and everything you drink as well as they should be. So there's a total of 5 different stages, often caused by other diseases, so like diabetes and high blood pressure. It's estimated about 15% of all Americans have some sort of kidney disease. Definitely not common in youth unless you're born with it, kind of similar to the heart failure. So the treatment, great little typo I have right there. The treatment is going to be diet and dialysis. So dialysis, basically what it is, it's a machine that actually helps filter your blood on the outside and then returns the blood back into your body. It's actually a pretty cool process. Rarely you use oral medication because everything that goes into the body has to go through the kidneys at one point. So oral medication tends to be a little bit of a dinger for them. And then exercise, as long as it's cleared by your doctor. Okay, this is a little controversial. So obesity and being underweight. So I will preface that this is controversial, like I said, but because you are overweight does not equal you being unhealthy. I know that's a little counterintuitive, or it doesn't really make too much sense. Not every doctor. A lot of doctors always say you need to lose weight. There was this really funny meme that I saw that someone got impaled by like a stick or something. And the doctor said, well, this wouldn't have happened if you lost a little weight. That makes no sense whatsoever. And it should never be a diagnosis, really. So it's rarely ever the cause of a medical condition. However, it can contribute to either the treatment or the overall outcome of any type of medication or therapy. So what it can do, it can increase pain in the joints and stress on already healthy or even unhealthy organs like the hearts, the lungs, kidneys, and even the liver. So basically, treatment is diet and exercise. The medical professionals are starting to see some benefit of oral medications for weight loss. This is just now starting to be unraveled in the VA healthcare system, but there's a lot of hoops, as you can imagine, to kind of get on that prescription. So whether or not it's going to be the most healthy, we still need to find out because it's still an evolving field to treat any type of overweight or obesity with medication. So underweight, to me, is significantly more dangerous than obesity. It can cause a lot of organ failure and dysfunction. So the heart, liver, kidney, lungs, anything you could possibly think of. Obviously, the treatment is diet, nutrition supplements, and medication. So there's something called, basically when you are so underweight and you don't have enough food, if you eat too fast, your body can basically go into shock and it can kind of shut down, which is very, very scary. So it's a very delicate thing to kind of talk about and to try to get people into eating a little bit more. But a lot of times it's just caused by age, or you had the flu and you haven't kicked it yet and you're just not really feeling like you want to eat. And a lot of times it can just kind of snowball into other things. Whew. We talked about the hard part. That's the most scientific part, I promise.
You're doing so great. I know Natalie had a question here about anorexia and bulimia, like what the difference is. I'm sure we'll go over that, but I don't know if you wanted to touch on that since we just...
Yeah, absolutely. So anorexia, there's a few different subcategories in anorexia, but if we're just talking about the umbrella term of anorexia, we primarily diagnose anorexia as individuals who not necessarily starve themselves, but they are very, very restrictive on certain food groups, or they have these mentalities that certain foods in general are just unhealthy, so they stay away from them. Whereas bulimia, that also has a lot of different ones, is normally associated with any type of purging. So purging can be defined as super, super, super excessive exercise after a meal to kind of make up the calories that you just ate. Or a lot of times bulimia can be actual throwing up and purging. So you still eat all the food, but we throw it up afterwards. And talking about eating disorders is a very, it's a sensitive topic, absolutely, because relationship with food it will be your longest lasting relationship, despite your girlfriend, your boyfriend, or whomever, but it should be treated with a lot of care and a lot of sensitivity. So the treatment is a lot of times intuitive eating, like I mentioned in the previous points. A lot of time that's actually used in bulimia and anorexia rehabilitation, where they start to work on that relationship with food and try to get down to the root cause. But a lot of time, the dietitian, while very important to the team, normally therapists, psychologists, and even doctors are very, very important to try to facilitate the best treatment possible. Hopefully that answered the question in a roundabout way.
One thing I wanted to add is another difference between anorexia and bulimia is that it can also involve a patient's perception of themselves. Where anorexics, they have this obsession or like a overwhelming desire to be a certain way, like a specific weight. They always feel like they're too big for their
Yeah.
Whereas bulimics, oftentimes they don't necessarily desire to be underweight or to lose weight. Bulimics is another. The main thing that Teague mentioned was that the compensatory behavior. Another compensatory behavior that a bulimics will engage in, besides purging and whatnot, will also be exercise, extreme exercise after eating a meal, or I don't know if you mentioned it, but taking laxatives so you could purge all that stuff. So that's the key thing about bulimia. It's the purging behavior. The compensatory behavior after eating that defines bulimia, and also the patient's psyche too. Anorexics, oftentimes they're not really even worried about their weight. Bulimics will actually obsess about their weight and think about it a lot. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit more too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like, even with those more like concrete definitions that Dr. Dang mentioned, there's, as science evolves, there's so many more different subcategories and different behaviors that highlight a different type of bulimia, anorexia, orthorexia, which is the desire to only eat healthy food. Like, there's a lot of different types of things that we're finding out as science evolves and treatment evolves too. So absolutely. All right, the meat of it, y'all. Can you tell I'm from Florida? I said y'all. All right, so fad diets and supplements. So this is a sweet spot for me because intuitive eating, like I mentioned, wants to reject this entire category overall. So this is a fun fact. The total weight loss and supplement industry rakes in a whopping $72.7 billion a year. That is a lot of money. Do you know how fast my student loans would be paid off if I got a fraction of that? So yeah. So why do so many fad diets exist? Why do so many supplements exist? Well, if they worked, shouldn't there really only be one? It's a little not the greatest logic. You know, there's 1,000 different keto supplements. Well, why is there 1,000, not just one, when keto is just one singular item?
Mm-hmm.
Very, very different and very difficult to kind of combat, especially when we're looking for the quickest fix or the easiest pill to swallow or the easiest supplement to swallow overall. So that's kind of the mentality that we're fighting here.
So Teague, in your opinion, when it comes to diet and optimal nutrition for people, what I believe is that there's no one diet that works for, like you said, there's no one diet that's a magic bullet. I think each person has to find the right diet that works for them because everyone's metabolism and genes are different. What do you think about that?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So this really just goes back to the point of when I'm sitting down with a patient, whether they're in a hospital bed, whether they're in a long-term care facility or sitting in my office. Well, I always ask, like, well, what is healthy to you? Healthy to someone. So let's give a scenario. I eat 5 Chick-fil-A sandwiches a day with 3 large fries and the really, really good large peach milkshakes that they just came out with. Okay, delicious, right? I'm coming to a dietitian and they're going to be like, well, what's healthy to you? I'm like, well, I know Chick-fil-A might be a little fatty and really high in sodium. Like, okay, maybe I can cut down to 4 sandwiches, 1 or 2 large fries, and 1 less milkshake. That, in essence, is healthy because it's healthy defined by the person who wants to achieve something. So when we're talking about specific diets, 100%, genetics, and just overall mentality, how they like to function as an adult, stuff like that will really play into a role of what will be best for them. And whenever I ask someone when they want to start like a specific diet, whether it's keto, Atkins, South Beach, intermittent fasting, the one question I always ask them is, will this be long-term? Can you see this happening for the rest of your life? Because your body is a machine. It loves to just run on a schedule and stay that way for the rest of its life until hopefully nothing happens. But overall, it's really important to make sure that whatever you want to do with your health, with your nutrition, with your exercise, that you're able to keep it going for the rest of your life, because that's what your body loves to do.
Thanks a lot for that.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about the man of the hour. Oh, keto. All right. So every time keto kind of pops up into a conversation, one of my Horcruxes die. That is a little Harry Potter throw-in right there. But so keto, believe it or not, it was actually originally invented and discovered as a treatment for those with epilepsy and who don't show improvement on medication alone. So the science behind this is basically glucose or sugars or carbs, all the same thing. It creates a little bit different energy and a little bit different reactions in the brain. It makes it a little bit more excited, a little bit more reactive, so to speak. Whereas fat, which is primarily what we're taking in on keto, doesn't necessarily spark those reactive reactions overall. So we tend to see a little bit less seizures, which is what epilepsy is, in individuals who take medication and follow a ketogenic lifestyle. So keto is high in fat and protein with very, very minimal carbohydrates. There's actually like 4 different types of keto. Like there's like a 4-to-1 keto, 3-to-1, like there's so many different types and ratios of how much fat we can have versus how many carbs. So it basically forces the body to utilize that fat we're taking in, whether it's from bacon, avocados, turkey, butter in our coffees, stuff like that, as the primary energy source, which is very, very different than what our body is used to, but it's able to happen. This is known as ketosis. So if you guys are reading anything about keto, that's what's happening basically. The hard part is when we're talking about keto, even though it's a therapeutic lifestyle for those with epilepsy, there's not a lot of long-term studies done to show the safety and especially the prevalence of heart disease. Because whenever we take in a lot of fat, especially saturated fats, heart disease and cardiovascular issues tend to follow when we do that. So there's nothing that's technically discovered past 6 months of following on keto. So I tend to normally put a stamp of no bueno on this lifestyle if you're not epileptic, because it's unsafe, because there's not a lot of science that backs it up as just a normal diet if we don't have epilepsy. So once we're off the ketogenic lifestyle, weight gain is often instant because your body is kind of starving for carbs. And as soon as we introduce those back into the body, it wants to cling on to them as quick as they can. So we might lose 50 pounds in the first 3 to 6 months, but a lot of times we actually gain 60, 70 back. So was it worth it to look good on a cruise, or is it not beneficial? Who really knows? Intermittent fasting. This is a fun one. So a bunch of different ways to fast. So the 16, that very first number before that colon, is how many hours we are not eating. So there's a 16-8, there's a 12-12, there's an 18-6, all different ways. All of them are deemed safe and sustainable for weight loss with no mental deficits, which is really important to consider. So this could potentially be a long-term diet or a long-term lifestyle that anyone can lead. However, kind of going back with what Dr. Dang said, genetics, how well suited are you for this diet overall, what's your schedule like. We don't want that fluctuation of doing that intermittent fasting or not doing it. That's where your body kind of gets all thrown off, and it just doesn't like us when we do that. So you are, believe it or not, you are still able to gain weight depending on how much is eaten in that eating window. So just because we're not eating for 8, 12, or even 6 hours, that doesn't kind of necessarily release the ability to gain any type of weight. Because regardless, whether it's fat, protein, or carbs, it's all energy. It really is. So whenever we take in any of that in too much, well, it's going to get stored as fat in our body, which tends to raise our weight just a little bit. Ooh, paleo or hunter and gatherer. So basically this resembles, I kind of like to call it the caveman diet. It's a diet that kind of resembles how early humans ate. So before we had technology to make, rice pilaf or bread or, all these fancy foods. So sometimes it can kind of be considered a raw diet. So no beans, because you have to cook those and boil those. That's a little too scientific for this era. So no grains, so pasta, rice, breads. Refined carbohydrates. So refined carbohydrates is basically like candy. So something like adding sugar into sweet tea, something like that. And dairy, because there wasn't any ability to farm any type of dairy. So it's basically similar to a plant-based diet. So meat is obviously involved. So whether it's beef, pork, seafood, chicken, turkey, whatever it is. So plant-based is basically defined as focusing a little bit heavier on fruits, vegetables, and doing that lean protein type of vibe. It is considered safe and can help improve glucose tolerance, so that type 2 diabetes type of area. It can improve weight loss, and it can actually help control your appetite, because normally when we do a lot of plants and fruits and stuff like that, there's a lot of fiber. Fiber is good for everything in your body, and it tends to keep you full a lot longer. This is a fun fact too. Supplements. So there is not a single supplement in the entire US that is regulated by the FDA. So the FDA is that governing body that says yes, no, or whatever the case is. So the FDA is only involved in any type of supplements if there are any claims attached to it. So basically a claim like, take this one pill and lose 100 pounds instantly. Then they would have to kind of research and kind of test, well, is that really real? Is it not real? What's the research behind this type of product? That type of thing. So remember what the definition of supplements is. It's to add to or instead of. So I personally only consider suggesting supplements, because I can't prescribe, when your nutrition needs are not able to be met by food. So if you're severely underweight and you're going through cancer treatments and you're just losing weight after weight after weight, then I'd be like, okay, time to bring in the heavy guns. Let's get you a nutrition supplement. Let's talk about this. Let's start drinking this or something like that to kind of help your body get enough energy throughout the day. And a really important thing, always consult your doctor whenever we're doing any type of supplements. So supplements like ginseng, St. John's wort, or ashwagandha, or however you pronounce it. I'm really bad at pronunciation, which is why I didn't go to pharmacy school. So we always want to, because it can interact with any type of prescribed medications, or with a certain condition you might have. It just might not it'll throw it all off, basically. Right. So I did want to mention about, because there were a lot of questions about a gluten-free diet and like gluten sensitivity and stuff like that. So I did write it in there, but I guess it didn't save. So I'm going to ad-lib this, because that's what I'm good with. So gluten is a protein that is found in most wheat products. So wheat, barley, and rye, they all have some sort of gluten complex in there. Gluten is actually a protein that helps make those muffins fluffy or that cake soft, or, it's kind of needed to give that structure of the product. Celiac, which is the common diagnosis, I guess, is an autoimmune disease that actually attacks your intestines when gluten is present in the GI system. So obviously that is not good whatsoever. So we tend to restrict all gluten if possible, because that just really, it helps preserve your intestines. And it also just makes you feel a lot better, because no one likes to feel bloated, have GI issues and stuff like that. It is kind of going down the road of kind of being this fad diet a little bit. So it's hard because celiac or a gluten sensitivity, which is not the same as an allergy or an autoimmune disease, some people can just be sensitive and they won't find out until they're sometimes 30, sometimes 50, sometimes 80. Like, I just worked with a veteran who is 92, and we're just finding out that, his rice, his pastas and stuff like that really upsets his stomach. So it can just kind of happen at a snap of a finger. So I normally don't talk about any type of restricting gluten until I've exhausted all other options, like milk, nuts, seeds, stuff like that are normally more common than gluten, but there's no actual benefit if we don't have a sensitivity or an allergy or an autoimmune disease to restrict any type of gluten, because it just doesn't really showcase any type of benefits whatsoever. Did I put it in here? Oh, I am so good. I did put it in here, and I put supplements in here. I'm just really good to myself. So these are going to be the nutrition myths that a lot of people get very hung up on, misinformed about, and to me, this is more of a disease than any type of kidney disease, heart disease, or diabetes, because misinformation can really just throw everyone down the wrong rabbit hole. So let's kind of start with my favorite one. Carbs are bad. So are carbs the enemy? Flat out, no. Even if you're diabetic, I will still tell you, need you to eat carbs. So carbs are often viewed to cause a lot of weight gain. So fun fact, a serving of rice or pasta is generally about the size of your fist. How does that really compare to your common restaurants like Olive Garden or Maggiano's or any other type of Italian restaurant? That plate is literally the size of my head, and it's mounding with a lot of pasta. Yeah, obviously carbs are going to gain weight because that's a really big portion. Like I said, carbs, fat, or protein, it's all energy. It all goes down the same funnel and does the same things. Obviously, anything in excess will cause you to gain a little bit of weight. So carbs are the primary source of energy, no matter what. And it's used in all people unless diagnosed with a medical condition or a genetic condition that doesn't allow your body to process them. Carbs are our friend and our food. That's a little Finding Nemo trivia for you too. Get the reference? All right, this is a big one too. So canned food is unhealthy. So believe it or not, canned or frozen, so they're honestly the same thing, canned and frozen food is picked at its peak ripeness and either canned or frozen to preserve its nutrients and flavor. So basically, that frozen broccoli that you buy in the supermarket has the same exact benefits as the fresh broccoli does. I will tell you that they might taste a little bit different, and that it's completely okay to have that sensitivity to that taste. You don't really like the way it tastes or smells, 100% understand. But however, it's the same exact broccoli, frozen. I don't think they have canned. That'd be kind of weird. canned, or fresh. So, fun fact, I'm full of them. When buying any type of canned vegetables, look for that low sodium option. And then once you drain out any of the liquid, rinse them with water. That'll reduce that sodium content by an additional 40%. So if we have doctors or cardiologists or kidney doctors that are saying you need to watch your sodium, you have high blood pressure, this would be a really good way that you can get the vegetables in and still not have a lot of sodium in the diet, which would be a good thing for you. Ooh, GMO and organic. So GMOs are not what a lot of people think they are. While yes, a lot of it might be pesticides or chemicals or, something like that. But a lot of times the GMOs that we're talking about and are trying to promote are the specific plants bred together to make an offspring or a baby plant that is resistant against pests, droughts, poor soil, and a lot of other different things. So if we're not familiar what a GMO is a genetic modified organism or something like that. So corn was actually considered the very, very first GMO. Corn back in the Aztec era, or Hispanics, or even like Mesopotamia, Ethiopia, that was their primary crop to create breads and just eat overall. It's very, very delicate. So without the alteration, a lot of societies wouldn't be as large as that they are today, because a lot of pests would eat them and it just wouldn't be that good for us. And a lot of times it's just breeding two different types of strains of plants. And kind of touching a little bit on organic, because I get this a lot, like, oh, you have to eat organic. That's the only healthy way. I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but organic broccoli is the same as fresh or like non-organic broccoli. It has the same fiber, same protein, same vitamins, nutrients, and stuff like that. So if I were to tell you to only eat a $7 head of broccoli versus a $2 head of non-organic broccoli, you might go broke just talking about broccoli. So I always try to promote people to eat any type of vegetable, any type of fruit that they're able to afford. And those canned and frozen products are just as good for us as the organic. Kind of similar to the frozen meals or frozen vegetables, they tend to taste a little different. And I understand that, because I kind of have a stigma with organic eggs. I think they just taste a lot better. So that's your prerogative. And if you want organic, by all means, but they do the same things in our body that non-organic does. What's wrong, sugar? That was just my accent of the day. So a lot of times, like, sugar is like bad for us, or alternative sugars, or fruit is really bad for us. Well, I'm gonna burst your bubble again. Fruit contains a sugar called fructose. And fun fact, glucose, which is the plain old sugar found in rice, pastas, candies, anything like that, it turns into fructose eventually. Somewhere down that really long metabolism line of all these really long, crazy words, it turns into the same thing that fruit has. So wouldn't that mean glucose is bad? Like I said, carbs are our friends and our food. So no. Fruit has a lot of vitamins, nutrients, and fiber, all capitals, that are really important for your body. And plus, they make a really good, natural, delicious dessert. Well, I'll go back to that actually. Are there fruits that have more or less sugar in them? Yeah, absolutely. That's just the way that they're made up. So if you really want to know what sugars have the least, normally melons and berries of all kind tend to have the least amount of sugar. So if we're looking for like a carb conscious snack or something, that would probably be a good choice for you. But if we wanted to kind of talk about what has the most, normally grapes and super, super, super ripe bananas and peaches tend to have the most.
Tygue, what's your view on honey and its use compared to sugar?
So there's a lot of actual research. This is kind of not the question or not the answer you're looking for, but I will get there, I promise. There's actually a lot of research as honey being more of a functional food. So it can be used as like a pre or probiotic to kind of help with allergies and stuff like that. So we're starting to uncover that honey might actually be more beneficial than just sweetening pastries or something like that. I will say that honey, when you taste it compared to sugar, this is just my personal spin on this, it's not as sweet as if you were to take a spoonful of sugar, like Mary Poppins said. It's normally, you tend to squeeze a little bit more into your cup than what's necessary. And with that kind of liquid type of carbs, it affects our body just a little bit differently. So especially for diabetics, it's probably not ideal if we're trying to watch our sugars and stuff like that, but it can be used and it's not unhealthy to have. Just be a little conscious of how hard you squeeze that bottle or how many spoonfuls you do. So moderation, basically. Ooh, oh goodness. The amount of consults from doctors I get about my patients eating too many eggs is abnormally high. So a lot of times people say, oh, eggs are really high in cholesterol. Well, yes, they have a lot of dietary cholesterol. However, if you eat dietary cholesterol, that does not affect that lab value that your doctor harps on you about or you have medication for. It does not affect your actual physical in your body cholesterol levels. So the main culprit that we're going to want to try to steer away from are going to be our saturated fats. So normally our saturated fats are going to be our red meats, any type of skin on any type of meat product, so like chicken, whole fat dairy products, so things like pastries, butters, whole fat milk, and actually coconut and palm oils too. So I know that might be a little counterintuitive because everyone's saying, oh, coconut oil is the best oil. Well, if we already have really high cholesterol and really high triglycerides, which are just the fats going through our body, which is a good thing, it's not going to be the best for us. It's not going to help you with lowering your cholesterol or provide you any type of health benefits. Gluten schmooten. I couldn't really find anything that rhymes with gluten, so I just had to make one up. So like I said, gluten is common protein found in wheat products, helps create that nice fluffy texture in baked goods. Gluten-free diet should primarily be reserved for those with a gluten sensitivity or severe allergy called celiacs. No health benefit overall for cutting out gluten, and if there is no allergy or sensitivity present. So there's really just no point unless you trial it and you're just, I feel a lot better. Just make sure that's something long-term and always ask your doctor.
T, we had a couple of questions about agave.
Yeah. Okay.
What can you tell us about that and its benefits compared to honey and sugar?
So agave actually has a little bit more fructose in it compared to actual honey. So I know this is kind of contradicting what I said, but so let's take high fructose corn syrup, for example. So that's a really, really condensed sweetened syrup found in like Coca-Colas and stuff like that, okay? Fructose does this weird thing if you just take it in super dense qualities or quantities that it tends to kind of bypass a few of your body's like checkpoints basically. So your body will just keep making more and more and more energy throughout the day if you have a lot of that high fructose corn syrup, which is why this sounds a little fat shaming, but individuals who do a lot of sodas tend to be overweight primarily because of that high fructose corn syrup. So we try to steer away from that as much as possible. But agave nectar does have a lot more fructose in it compared to honey. So if we're doing a lot of that agave nectar, it's honestly, if we're doing a lot of it, maybe let's go for a little bit more natural forms like sweetening with a little bit of orange juice or, something like that, or even using honey or using stevia, which is a sugar alternative, which is completely healthy. That's fine. But if we're just doing it in small doses, just to do some tea or just to bake a few pastries, not an issue whatsoever. So that's really the only difference between agave and honey.
Thank you very much, T.
Yeah, absolutely. Supplements, already talked about it. Just remember, let's make sure that we always run it past our doctors first before starting any type of multivitamin, vitamin C, D, E, whatever the case is, especially herbal products, because they can interfere a lot with any type of prescriptions. And those prescriptions are technically prescribed to you to help you, and we don't want them to not work or work too much. We're almost done, I promise. All right, the healthy recommendations that we're talking about. So I gave you all this information that's floating in your heads, out of your heads, in one ear, out the other. So what do you do? How do you use it? So like I said, I always ask my patients to define what healthy is to you. So you are more than welcome to ask yourself, like, what is healthy? Like, I might want to stay around to see my granddaughter go to college. I want to, run a marathon. You have all these goals for yourself personally. That's what you need to define for yourself. That way you can make those informed decisions on diet, exercise, even mental health, and even a better sleep pattern can be considered those healthy changes. So if we wanted to get kind of a little bit nitty gritty about diet recommendations, it's really hard to provide general diet recommendations because you're not sitting in my office. I don't have a medical record here for you. It's that type of thing. So what I'm talking about right now is completely umbrella and it's not specific, and I'm not giving you a diagnosed or prescribed diet. So just remember that. So for youth, I did a 1,600 calorie diet overall, and we'll talk about those calories in the next section. But per day, 1 1/2 cup fruit, 2 cups vegetables. Raw is deemed a little bit better because during the cooking process, some of those vitamins and nutrients can kind of seep out just a little bit. 5 ounces of grains. And if you go to Olive Garden, you get at least 45 ounces. 5 ounces of protein and 3 cups of dairy. And I know that will be a good question to answer in a second. Adults overall, so I did about, I think, a 2,200 calorie because 2,000, that's a little iffy. So 2,000 to 2,200, you're about 2 cups of fruit, 3 cups of vegetables, hence raw is better, 7 ounces of grain, 6 ounces of protein, and 3 cups of dairy. I generally do not use these serving sizes at all for any of my population whatsoever. I normally try to say, like, if you were to close your fist right now, that right there is a serving of an apple, or holding out your palm and looking from the base of your wrist to your middle finger, that's about 3 to 5 ounces. I try to make nutrition as easy as possible to kind of not make them overwhelmed and scared of the food that we're talking about. So, like I said, this is actually what I tend to use. And do not make fun of my amazing Photoshop job. It is absolutely atrocious, and I know that. So this is the method that I normally use for at least 90% of my population. So grains, so your potatoes, rice, peas, breads, pasta, anything like that is going to be in that top left corner, so 1/4 of your plate. So, like I said earlier, a serving of pasta and rice and beans is about the size of our fists, and that fits very comfortably right there at that 1/4. Meat and protein, it's about 3 to 5 ounces per serving, give or take. So about the palm size of your hand is a really good generalized serving size. And then, believe it or not, I feel like everyone's dad every time I talk to them. You gotta eat your vegetables. So non-starchy vegetables, so like carrots, bell peppers, any type of leafy green, Brussels sprouts, anything that's not a pea, a carrot, or a potato, that should be half of your plate. So that tends to promote a little bit generally more healthful diet, or a generalized, not meal plan, but thought process when it comes to food, because it's a little bit easier to visualize your food rather than measure, because no one likes measuring cups in the kitchen unless you're actually making some sort of pasta. So, exercise, everyone's favorite or not favorite thing. What type of physical activity does everyone think of immediately? So weightlifting, swimming, track and field, marathons, triathlons, Tour de France, stuff like that, the really, really extreme versions of exercise. Whenever I ask a veteran, I'm like, well, what's exercise? Well, what type of physical activity do you do? Well, I don't go to the gym. First answer. I'm like, well, do you walk your dog? Do you fold laundry? Do you mow your yard? Yeah, I count that as physical activity. Anything that's not sitting or laying. So walking your dogs, vacuuming, any type of yard work. So anything that's not sitting and laying is always going to be more healthful for you and promote a generalized sense of well-being. These recommendations. I don't use these either, but these are from the American Heart Association, so I would say they know what they're talking about. So kids 6 to 17 years, at least 60 minutes of activity, which is moderate to vigorous intensity. So mostly aerobic, so running, stuff like that, a lot of fun. Include vigorous intensity activity on at least 3 of those days per week. Include muscle and bone strengthening, so weight bearing, so things can be like swimming or helping bring in the groceries, like that could be weight bearing, absolutely. Adults is a little bit more, so 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity or 75 minutes per week of vigorous intensity, or a combination of both, preferably spread throughout the week. Don't do 150 minutes in one sitting. You're going to be really tired and your body's not going to feel too good. So add moderate to high intensity strength, muscle strengthening activities like resistance, weights, bringing in the groceries or taking the stairs with the groceries, stuff like that. At least 2 of those weeks. Anything to preserve those muscles to keep you looking like Popeye, that's what we want. All right, we made it to the last one. So, nutrition resources. And I'm going to tell you how to look these up. So anything for heart health, obviously look for the American Heart Association. Any type of kidney health, look for the National Kidney Foundation. Diabetes, guess what? American Diabetes Association. And then I have just like general ones, so nutrition education and just general information about whether it's diseases or medication, stuff like that. Always try to do like the CDC, like the government site, your public health department website. So I have the LA County one here for you, or any health department site. So Florida versus California versus New York, they're going to give a lot of the generalized same information. Eatright.org, that is my personal governing body's website. They give a lot of quick little articles. It's the American Dietetics Association, basically, and Choose My Plate. So those really fancy diet recommendations that I gave you, I got off of choosemyplate.gov. Completely free. They give you too much information for it to be free. It's actually kind of crazy, but they can give you a lot of insight on how to apply for food stamps, how to build a thrifty and healthy budget. They have a lot of interactive things, from being 1-year-old all the way through being 150. They have a lot of great information. All right, when researching, and this is actually a really fun one because my high school English teacher is actually on the Zoom call. So she'll be very happy that I'm talking about research. So this is really important. So when trying to dispel a lack of misinformation, whether it's on art or English or science or medical, it's really important, where are we getting that information from? So be really careful of blog posts, not to throw anyone under the bus, but especially from non-dietitian personal trainers and nutritionists. .com websites, .org, they can be biased, can be. And then self-proclaimed nutritionist, they often have a weekend education. So what to look for: any type of .edu or .gov websites are going to be the best source of information because they have so many standards and so many regulations to be able to post that information, because if they post the wrong information, they're in a lot of doo-doo. So, and I'm sure Lynn can also help you with any type of researching or trying to find those websites. So she's a great resource, absolutely.
Yes, I love researching.
I'm a glutton for punishment for it.
Well,
And
this was so wonderful. Yeah, yes, continue.
no, I was going to say that's it. I'm open for questions. Hopefully I didn't talk your ear out too much.
That was such an amazing presentation.
Oh, good.
Really that. So yeah, right now, that's the end of the presentation. T, me, and Lynn, we're gonna hang around and try to answer some of the questions that were submitted before the program. And then also, if you have some questions, shoot it into the chat box and we'll try to get to those too. And I'm sorry we're running a little overboard in terms of
That's
time.
my fault.
No, all good. I love all the information you give. I think it's better to have all that information than to just cut the program short abruptly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so we have some questions coming in. Are you a registered dietitian?
I was just responding. Okay, so yes and no. I'm in that kind of like purgatory state. So I know all the same things that a registered dietitian knows. I just have to pass that silly exam that I need to study for, basically. So I'm in that limbo stage. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
qualified to give any type of nutrition education. So everything I'm telling you now is completely okay and good and healthy.
We absolutely believe it. And you're so wonderful and so detailed. Let's see. Roberta said, thanks for an outstanding and informative presentation.
Oh, thanks so much. And I
Mm,
forgot to showcase my avocado shirt. Lynn told me it was National Guacamole Day, so I had
sure is.
to change to be more festive.
Yes, we love it. Let's see. Angela here asks, what are macros and are they necessary for us to count? If so, how?
Macros
Oh,
are those macronutrients. So our carbs, our fats, and our proteins. Generally speaking, we don't really count those, moderate them, or kind of look at them overall, unless we're kind of in that serious athletic realm or anything like that, because we can tailor those a little bit to be a little bit more specific to your training regimen. But in the general population, there's really not too much of a need for it overall.
great. I hope that answers your question. Natalie asks, oh, I know, I know they were here last week. Sorry if I messed up your name. Can you discuss biotin a little bit?
Biotin, absolutely. I don't know if you want to get too much involved in that, but the fun part is this is all basically about every nutrient in your body. And I keep it, it's like my Bible for nutrition. So basically what biotin is, it's kind of like a vitamin that helps regulate like your genes' ability to produce stuff. So that can be your toenails, it can be your skin, it can honestly be anything. So a lot of times it unravels and creates those proteins, and your hair and everything is those proteins. So a lot of times if we're not 100% not competent, that's definitely the wrong word, sufficient in those vitamins, we tend to see not the greatest hair growth overall, but a lot of times biotin is pretty beneficial when it comes to any type of like hair and skin, nail type of growth. Hopefully that was a good enough answer.
I hope so, because I actually take those supplements called hair, skin, nail.
Yeah, and that has biotin, folate, B12. It has a bunch of things. Yeah.
All of that.
Biotin is just another name for vitamin B7.
Yeah. Yep. We have 45 different names that all mean the same thing. Like carbs, sugar, and glucose is all the same thing.
And it's so funny that you showed that book, because in my board exam book for all those nutrients, I think it was like maybe about 5 pages.
Yeah, I literally have an entire chapter on just biotin.
Yeah. So that just further shows you the discrepancy in nutritional education. And at that point, the all those nutrients, we're focused more on the biochemistry. What enzymes does it affect? What pathways it affects in the body? And what happens if it's missing in terms of like deficiency and
Yeah.
excess consumption. So there's a big difference in the focus of it.
Yeah, like I really focused on why and how it works, whereas I can't really put a word on what you did, but probably just the signs and symptoms of not getting enough or too much in
Yeah,
general,
pretty much.
just to be able to diagnose and next patient, unfortunately.
Mhm. So CL here asks, what are your thoughts on fermented foods?
So fermented foods can be a good thing, or they can be something that doesn't necessarily help someone. Um, the GI system from mouth all the way down to the bottom is completely different from each person. So fermented foods are basically foods that are introduced to some sort of bacteria, and that tends to make them taste a little different. They incorporate a little bit of live bacteria, which is kind of like a probiotic. So it's not a hit or miss. They can be considered a functional food, so they have a lot of properties and stuff like that, but it's all going to really depend on how your body reacts to them. So if you love kimchi, if you love fermented eggs, if you love, kefir or something like that, then by all means, absolutely. But the thought is overall that we're introducing healthful bacteria to your GI system to kind of help you, digest foods, have overall good gut health.
Wonderful.
That
What
book
are you,
again? Someone was asking what was that book that you just showed them.
Oh boy, you're going to get yourself into a wormhole. But Advanced Nutrition and Human Metabolism, it's not a picture book. So if you're interested in looking it up, look at that. No one likes that.
Memories of biochemistry.
That was the worst class. I hated it. But just letting you know, it's not a picture book. It's not super, it's not rainbows and unicorns, unfortunately. So if you want to, by all means, you can rent it, purchase it, download it for free, pirate it from a website, but don't do that. Anything like that.
mhm. Someone here asks, what are your thoughts on the concept of drinking your veggies, such as smoothies? What are your thoughts about protein powders?
Any type of veggies that we can kind of get in. So like you can make a blueberry and spinach smoothie or something like that. You're still getting the vitamins and nutrients that are found in those, the spinach leaves and the blueberries and stuff like that. It is a healthful way to do it. There's no science that shows that you're destroying that fiber, which is really important in those foods. They do say that the fiber stays intact, all that type of stuff. I question that a little bit, so I always try to say if you can eat the food, but it's completely healthy to drink it as well.
Wonderful. Do you have any recommendations for an underweight picky eater?
Picky eaters, they're a lot of fun. Believe it or not, a lot of dietitians are actually picky eaters. That is a fun fact, and that is hardcore science.
I didn't know that.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. One of my fellow interns, she had like 5 foods that she ate, and I'm like,
Wow.
come on. So when it comes to picky eating, a lot of time, um, I always try to say disguise it as much as possible. So doing those smoothies is a great option, experimenting with what you can put in. So some things we can do that's really easy, like oatmeal and peanut butter. That peanut butter is a really good, healthy source of fat and protein. Anything to kind of spruce it up as much as possible. And don't be afraid to try new foods. Your taste buds change at least every 7 years. And especially if you get sick with like the flu or something, you might come out of that flu and say, I love Brussels sprouts. Like it can change almost instantly. So always try it. My family always has a no thank you helping. So, and I see that she is 12. So a lot of times I always, I don't counsel too much with any type of parent child combinations, but a lot of times what you can do is you can try to experiment with zoodles or something like that. Get some spiralized veggies. Normally butternut squash is a little bit more textured to spaghetti. Try to get something close to the color that they normally like. You can even dye the food too, that is fine. So it's things like that can really help get you in there. And you can add a little bit of olive oil to stuff to kind of get your weight up too.
And I included a link from the Mayo
Yeah.
Clinic about how to
Yes, good source.
ways to deal with a picky eater.
Mm-hmm.
There's one thing I want to chime in on. There is actually a disease, a variant of picky eating, which is called a disease. Which is severe. It's called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Now, this is actually an issue because it could affect your health. Whereas picky eating is not really that concerning, I guess.
Right.
And if the audience wants to know about the difference between avoidant restrictive food intake disorder versus just being a picky eater, I'll be happy to answer that in the chat box. But yeah, I can. Let's move on to some other questions.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was muted. So I have a question here. I'll give this one to Irving. Irving, does gluten affect most people with mental health?
Does gluten affect most people with mental health? Okay, so that's a very interesting question. There's actually some research. So there's a 2018 study that reports that there could actually be a benefit in gluten-free foods in those with a mood disorder and a congruent pre-existing gluten-related disorder such as celiac disease, IBS, or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So there's that link. However, as of right now, there's no evidence showing benefits for people that do not already have a pre-existing gluten-related disorder. Although there's a lot of research being done into that. So
Yeah, I think I read that same article. Look at us. So basically, yeah, there's not too much. They're just showing like a correlation. Like, yeah, sometimes gluten can help with these symptoms or mental health issues, stuff like that. But there is not like hardcore, like set in stone. Yes, you need to go on a gluten-free diet to help relieve these symptoms and stuff like that. But I hope that changes because mental health is a very, very important thing. And I really think that diet can help and exercise can help. So I would love to help people with that as much as possible.
definitely.
Great. I have another question here that was submitted by Karen. And I'm gonna loop in my question too. Karen asked, do you think core and cardio workouts are healthy for teens? And the question that I wanted to loop in was, is it better to eat before or after you work out?
Okay, so any type of movement, cardio, anything like that is going to be healthy really for anyone unless a doctor tells us otherwise. So I always say, unless a doctor tells us otherwise. Yes, I know all these fabulous things, but whether I work in a hospital, inpatient setting, all of my orders, all of my recommendations always go through a doctor. So while I know just as much, sometimes if not more than a practicing doctor, I still have to be underneath them for supervision overall, whether I pass my exam or I don't. It's just how it is. So yes, any type of movement's going to be good. It's really going to go down to how we fuel our body. So exactly Lynn's question. So there's two different types of exercise, aerobic and anaerobic. Anaerobic's that short burst, like sprinting, you're running away from those killer clowns that we had a few years ago, stuff like that. Those are going to be the ones that's going to primarily use a lot of sugar that's formed in our muscles. Okay. So obviously doing a lot of, carbs beforehand, stuff like that can be really beneficial. Anaerobic is going to primarily be focused on stored energy. So that pesky belly or the love handles, whatever that is, those are all sites of formed energy. So it's how we fuel. So generally speaking, if we engage in any type of weightlifting, not super, super long, like cross country type of cardio, just like running, like a short jog, whatever, it's nice to have about like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. That'd be like perfect for carbs and protein and fats, about an hour and a half-ish before we run. And then always follow it up with a little bit of protein, a little bit of carbs, a little bit of fat. So just like a nice little meal afterwards.
Wonderful. My dear friend Jessica has a question here.
Yeah.
It seems like most of a dietitian's work is in helping people already diagnosed with a medical condition, for example, diabetes, or in speaking to adults in attempts to combat misinformation. Do you have any thoughts on how we in this country can better educate our people from a young age as to good nutrition?
Ooh, that's a good one.
There's
Um,
things we could do.
yeah, I'm like, stop it. No. This is just me personally saying, like, there's no like right answer and there's no, well, I mean, there's wrong answers, but there's no correct answer for this question. But what I would personally say is try to be gentle to everyone. It's really important because food has to be eaten every day. Whether you're taking it in through a feeding tube or taking it in by mouth or through your veins, it's something that's really important to everyone. Like, look at the Italian community. They center their entire life around pasta and food and family and stuff like that. For you to tell them that, oh, pasta is bad, you're getting godfathered. I'm so sorry. Like, it's just not happening. So what I mean by being gentle is just try your hardest to be like, well, food isn't good, food isn't bad. Like, how do you know that? Or, kind of judge it, kind of push back a little bit, or really just try to promote all food is good for you, whether it's those chicken McNuggets at McDonald's or, a fruit and vegetable smoothie. It all kind of does the same thing, and just understanding whether it's carbs, fat, or protein goes down the same hole and it does the same stuff.
Mhm. I think another way that would help is also if there could be some kind of implementation where you would have kids actually involved in the cooking process, like school, like some kind of culinary class, not just a class where you learn about nutrition and facts, but an actual class where you get to pick out the healthy vegetables and fruits and then cook it. I think that would be something that could really help promote healthy education and get kids interested too. But that's up to the policymakers and those who decide what the school curriculums are.
Absolutely. And that actually goes back to one of the previous questions about picky eaters.
Mhm.
It's a lot of science is showing that the more you get the child involved in the cooking, I know 12 might be kind of a age to get them to do anything with their parent, because I know that's how I was. But any type of, involvement in the food, the shopping, the cooking, anything like that can normally help lead to like, oh, doesn't this look good? And lead by example too is always a good thing.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. I had a question that was submitted to us to me privately. Is drinking too much water bad for you? I'll start. I'll have Irving, Dr. Dang answer this first, and then we'll jump to you, Tygue.
Yeah.
Okay. So, short answer, yes. There is such a thing called water intoxication. So, the body has a certain amount of electrolytes in it, which electrolytes, I mean sodium, potassium, chloride, and calcium, amongst other things. So your body needs to maintain that within a certain range. If things get too high or too low, then you start having problems. So when you drink an excess amount of water, that water is going to enter your body and it's going to start to dilute the amount of electrolytes in your body. So that's going to cause some issues, such as it can start causing cognition defects, so confusion. It could lead to nausea, vomiting. Severe cases of water intoxication can actually cause irregularities in the way your heart beats. We call those arrhythmias. It can even lead to seizures and, worst case scenario, coma and even death. So yes, drinking too much water can be very dangerous for your health.
Ditto. Exactly. I mean, exactly what he said. That was the exact answer that I was going to give. I do have a private question about going vegan and stuff like that. So vegan and vegetarian is actually kind of very, very similar to, this sounds bad, to a fad diet, because now we're moving into a society that's a lot more health conscious compared to previous generations or previous societies overall. So it's all going to be really, can you sustain that? You can be 100% healthy, just as healthy as a meat eater or even a vegetarian as a vegan. 100% possible. If that is something that you really, really, really want to do, I would recommend talking to a dietitian if possible, or looking up those really important resources that I provided to Lynn to kind of go into a little bit more information. If you are going to do that, definitely talk to your doctor about taking B12, vitamin D, and iron supplements, because that is one thing the vegan and vegetarian diets really kind of lack.
A lot of the B12 comes from animal proteins. That's why vegans tend to lack that nutrient.
Opinion, what is the most healthiest and safest diet?
Man.
Food. that would be my answer. Anything that you feel that you wake up and you have the energy to do the things that you love, the things that you want, that's going to be the healthiest diet. And if you feel that you can keep doing that for the rest of your life, so whether that's vegan, vegetarian, intermittent fasting, keto, don't, paleo diet, stuff like that, if you feel amazing on it and you really think you can sit down with yourself and say, I can do this for the rest of my life, to me, that's the healthiest and safest diet, honestly, because your body just loves normalness. It just wants to be normal. I'll write it in the chat box.
I got a question from a couple of people asking about the role of genes and how they affect a person's weight. So when it comes to a person's weight, you definitely have to consider the genetics behind that person and also the environment. Environment in terms of like what we eat, exercise, and things that most people know. Genes do play a role, and the answer gets kind of complicated because studies have shown that it is estimated that genes can influence a person's weight from anywhere between 25% up to 80%, depending on the person. So that's a huge range, and basically what that means is someone, their genes may only determine a little bit of how much they weigh, whereas another person, it's primarily their genes that are determining their weight and their inability to lose weight. So for people that are eating healthy and exercising and very conscious of what they eat, and they're just struggling to lose that weight, it could be a genetic factor. Obviously, there's a lot of research that's being done into this, and there's always new information coming out. So one thing to look at is if you're working out, you're dieting, and you're able to lose weight fairly easily, then you can, that could be a clue that your genes aren't as important of a factor. But if you're trying really hard, you can't lose the weight, then that could indicate that genes for you are a huge factor, and the environment is a significantly less of a factor. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
for
that's
people.
it.
I think that's a good question. Can you elaborate on cortisol? So you want to take this one, Tygue, or?
Yeah, I can.
Okay,
I will defer a lot of information to Dr. Dang, but from what I understand, cortisol is kind of like the inflammation type of marker in the body. It can cause a lot of things to stop working in the body, so stop producing, or it can kind of kick it into overdrive and make things work even more. So some people are very different where cortisol is released, so you're really stressed. You might going through your period if you're a female, or menopause, or just severe emotional, mental, or physical stress, and that's released. It can cause you to either eat more or it can cause you to eat less. Everyone's very different. It kind of goes on to that genetic portion that Dr. Dang was talking about. But primarily what it is, it's that inflammation marker that kind of speeds things up or kind of slows things down in the body. That was a very elementary way of explaining it. So I'm going to give it over to Dr. Dang.
Cortisol is basically a hormone that's produced in the human body and what we call the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are actually these little glands that are above your kidneys. And like T was saying, this is definitely a hormone that is released during stress. So it kind of activates during your fight or flight response. So some of the biochemical things that cortisol does is that it mobilizes your energy stores. So what I mean by that, I mean the glucose in your body. It sends a signal to the body to get that glucose ready to be fuel for you to burn in case you really do need to fight or run away from something. And of course, there are a lot of studies that show its effects on inflammation. Another thing cortisol does is that it can also have a negative impact on your immune system. It will actually suppress certain aspects of your immune system and make you more susceptible to infection. That's why people say, like, if you stress too much, you're gonna get sick. That's definitely some truth in that. So, and these are just some of the things that cortisol does. There's so many more things that cortisol does. Because of its structure, it kind of mimics some other hormones in the body, and it can have some slight minor effects in terms of like renal activity too. And yeah, the cortisol does a lot, but those are like some of the main things that cortisol can do in your body.
Ta-da.
Great. Yay, that's a lot of great information. I'll take this question from Angela. Is it true that there's certain foods that females have to avoid during their period?
What I do know, and from what I understand, chocolate is a must for most females. But overall, there's not a lot of science that's really showing like you need to eat this and not that for either less cramps, stuff like that. There's really, the menstrual cycle overall is not super, super connected to diet to some extent. Like, you can have a really poor diet and you might be a little irregular overall, but when it comes to relieving symptoms or making it less painful or anything like that, there's not a lot of information or research regarding that.
Tygue, I wanted to talk to you about. So I got a question asking, is milk bad for you?
Okay.
I have some interesting input on that, but I'd love to hear yours.
Yeah. So I'm kind of that fence walker when it comes to milk. I am very aware that milk is a sensitive topic and a sensitive food for some people. So there's a lot of like, we are the only species that drinks other animals' milk. And yes, I understand that, correct. But if we're talking about, let's compare almond milk versus regular milk. The vitamins and nutrients in the cow's milk is basically unmatched compared to almond milk, meaning the cow's milk does have a lot of benefits when it comes to vitamins, nutrients, calcium, vitamin D, the things that we normally don't get too much on. So normally I kind of go down the route of, if I talk about milk or a dairy product overall, people are like, oh, milk makes me feel a little gassy, or milk doesn't make me feel that good. I'm like, okay, no milk. If we're going to do a milk alternative, always try to look for a fortified one with calcium and vitamin D. That's the important part. But to me personally, yes, there's a lot of research, but I'm kind of that 50-50. If you can tolerate milk, why not? If you can't or don't want to, that's fine. 100% okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like milk definitely does have a lot of great benefits. And like T said, it is unmatched in terms of how it can provide all these nutrients and great stuff for your body. I read recently an article that showed it's an article from 2015. It shows an association of increased risk of acne development in teens that drink skim or low-fat milk. However, no association was found for full-fat milk. Another research article that followed 52,795 women with an average age of 57 showed that higher intakes of full-fat and reduced fat dairy milk were associated with a greater risk of breast cancer. And no clear association no clear associations were found between soy products and breast cancer. And another important association was that no association was found between cheese and yogurt and the increased risk of breast cancer. So there's always new information coming out, and it's just really tough to keep track of all. But remember, this is just one research article that's showing this possible link between dairy milk and increased risk of breast cancer. What we try to do as medical or health professionals is that we will look at an article, see who wrote it, what were the motivations for writing it, is there any bias, and then we will try to find other articles that replicated that result, because that's the most important thing. Can you repeat these results to make it credible? If you can't, then it's less likely to be credible. So I just wanted to give that information out there for people, just so that they can make their own decision on it, and also so they can do their own research. And like T said, whenever you do research, make sure you're checking your source. so important.
Thank you for that, guys. I have a really good question here from a person that DM'd me. Is there specific foods that cause acne?
Oh, well, there was a study that shows in teens, the drinking skim or low-fat milk does have an associated increased risk of acne development. T, do you have any other input on that?
Not really, because there's a lot of research that's saying like, no, nothing causes acne, and then everything causes acne. So it's kind of like, acne I know is very, 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 very genetic, 100%. And just overall skin hygiene, washing your face, stuff like that. But when it comes to diet, a lot of what I'm seeing is primarily like a diet that's very diversified. So eating a lot of colors, so all the color peppers and stuff like that, and doing a lot of fruits and vegetables tends to result in a little bit less acne. But that normally, enough water and just a lot of trial and error with certain types of food is going to kind of, because I know like one of my friends, she'll eat like Kraft macaroni and cheese. That's it. Like Kraft macaroni and cheese is the only thing that'll make her break her out. Whereas like she'll eat like Velveeta, which is a controversy in itself, and she won't break out. So some foods are just triggers for some people, and then some of them aren't. So yes and no. And I know that's not a good answer, but
yeah, I think it really depends on the person too. Some foods
yeah.
cause a bad effect in some people, and other people, they're lucky and they don't have to worry about it. Yeah.
All right. There's so many great questions. I know we're like running towards the end. I have a crazy talk here. But I do want to ask one question that was submitted, and I think it's really important to ask since it has to do with COVID. And then maybe I can, let's see, I can give you this question first. Irving, and you tell me what you think, and then we'll turn it over to Teague. What are the top 5 vitamin supplements that we can take to build our immune system to fight COVID? What types of foods or supplements are good to take in to boost our immune system?
So, interestingly, vitamin D treatment has been found to decrease the incidence of viral respiratory tract infections, especially in those that already have a vitamin D deficiency. I believe Dr. Fauci himself recently came out and recommended vitamin C and D as supplements. There is some new research. I read it in JAMA. It has shown a link to between vitamin D deficiency and an increased risk of getting COVID. And basically, the vitamins, it seems like they have a role to potentially help reduce the chance of getting the virus and reducing the severity of the disease. And if you're interested in that article, I will send that link right now into the chat box. And then vitamin C, everyone knows you get it from citrus, but it's an important cofactor in the human body. And what does that mean? A cofactor is something that your enzymes have to use to function. And basically, vitamin C is important for wound healing, collagen synthesis, and it's also an antioxidant. So there's some research that has shown some of the benefits of vitamin C in fighting COVID are due to its antioxidant properties. Because when a virus infects a cell, it produces a lot of so-called waste products, and the antioxidants can help with that somewhat. But of course, this research is all preliminary, and there's definitely more that needs to be done. However, I think the reason why vitamin C and D is recommended is because it's so readily available, and we know the side effects of it pretty well. So I guess my answer is that you can take vitamin C and D. Those are the only ones that have been shown to have some kind of benefit against COVID. There's nothing else that's been shown to have that benefit so far, although research is still continuing on that. And I will post the article right now.
And then for me, I'm just going to talk about general health and like immunity overall. The primary ones that play a big role in any type of immunity or the immune system in general are going to be vitamin C. So we're starting to see a lot of research for vitamin D, but a lot of zinc is, and then vitamin E. So E, zinc, C, and D. Those are the general ones that we talk about when we talk about like an immune function type of vitamin regimen. But remember, always consult your doctor.
All right. Well, I know we definitely went way over time because there's just so much amazing information that you've both shared. And there are more questions to go through, but I really feel that a lot of these were addressed in your presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and we'll conclude our program here with both of you today. So I want to take this time to thank Tygue. You're so amazing, and I'm really interested in getting you to come back because everyone here just absolutely we just adore you. I'm gonna bring you back.
I'll wear a different food shirt.
And of course, yes, we're so grateful for you and for helping our community here in Los Angeles understand more about what good health is and how we can take good care of ourselves, especially during this time. And thank you, Dr. Dang, for your expertise as well. It's always so wonderful for us to just learn more about what good health is, because I like what my friend Jessica was saying earlier, there's not enough information out there teaching us what are the foods that we need to eat. We just constantly see like all this stuff on social media and on commercials about keto diet and, oh, take this pill, you'll lose 100 pounds right away. Like it's not that easy.
So much misinformation going out there.
Yeah. Oh, it's raining in Florida.
I know, we're like polar opposites right now.
Because we have a lot of fires. It's really smoky over here right now. So yeah, it's suggested for us to not go outside.
Yeah, right. Absolutely.
Yeah, but anyway, so everybody, I did link 2 surveys down below in the chat box. So please take a moment to fill that out for us. Let us know what you thought of the program. I'm thinking next time we'll probably need to extend this because 2 weeks ago we had mental health, so that was really popular as well. So in 2 weeks we're gonna have a what is it? A gynecologist? What is it? What do you call?
Obstetrician and gynecologist.
Yeah, so he's going to be here in 2 weeks. His name's Dr. Kevin Fung. He's a really good friend of mine. He works at the USC Medical Center here in Los Angeles. So he'll be talking about women's health. And I think for anybody, female or male, if you want to learn a little bit more about, women's health, it would be a great, a discussion for you to attend. And I know he's putting together a really wonderful presentation. So yeah, we'll go ahead, we'll end the program here. And thank you everybody for being with us today. To all of my teams that are here, I see a lot of your names. Please be sure to fill out the volunteer submit form, or form that I emailed all of you, so that way you'll get service hours. And for everybody else, thank you. Thank you for being with us.
Once again, thank you everyone for coming out. I know we went over the time that we ran to, but I think we had a lot of good information here, and I think I think it was really informative. I learned a lot. This is really informative for me. We're gonna hang out for a little bit more, but that's basically it for the program. Ashley, I think there's one other question that I think is really important if we could discuss it real fast. So,
sure. Last question.
Someone messaged me privately, and they had a question about anorexia because there's something that's on their mind. So they wanted to know how to make a healthy food choice not based on caloric value. In terms of, and I'm assuming that's in terms of like relating to anorexia.
Right. So that's kind of a tricky one, only because anorexia is a very, I wouldn't say delicate, but we tend to, there's a lot of different hands in the pot whenever we talk about any type of eating disorder. Bulimia, anorexia, orthorexia, anything under this umbrella term of eating disorders. But this is simply just advice. This is not a medical decision or anything like that. Whenever we talk about calories, I think it would be good to know that I think calories are the stupidest and most made up number known to man. Food is food. When we talk about eating any type of food, a lot of society has like gotten away from the interoceptive awareness. So basically, it's like a baby. They don't keep eating just because, you know, there's breast milk there. They stop when they eat, and they eat when they're full or eat when they're hungry. So if I were to give like any type of advice for like healthful like food or anything like that, just remember, you want to eat to fuel and to feel good. If you eat that cheeseburger, well, yes, it might have a lot of calories, and you don't feel good after that, is that a food that we want to have in our diet a lot of the times? So normally I just always recommend, you know, experiment with other foods, you know, try different foods, and just calories are just, they're empty. To me, they just don't really make as much sense. And I don't really talk about them a lot because a lot of stigma and weight is associated with them. So don't feel guilt about them. It's just food, and that tends to help people make a little bit more decisions overall.
Yeah, in terms of anorexia in the from the medical side, it is a very difficult thing to deal with because oftentimes there are some mental health issues going on with that. So it really does involve a team. It would be involving maybe your primary care doctor, and then it could also involve the care of a psychiatrist or therapist, and then also a dietitian, because it's important to get that person well in so many different ways. We have to come at the problem or the issue from a lot of different angles. So it would definitely be a collaborative effort in dealing with anorexia. And for anyone going through anorexia or an eating disorder, or if you know someone going through it, I just posted a link that could be useful. And this is definitely something that you should seek professional help on, you know, because it's not something that you should go through alone.
Absolutely.
That was wonderful advice.
All right.
Are we
Thank you.
finally calling it?